but like it's too the juice is no longer worth the squeeze.
No, it's terrible. It's long past. The fruit is rotten and
Yeah.
the juice is rancid. Welcome into It's Always Sunny in Chiefs Kingdom. I'm Austin. Find me on X at Real Bird Lawyer, Bird Law Expert on Blue Sky, where I mostly post about Warhammer with my neurodivergent and queer friends. Here with me, as always, my co-host Taylor at Taylor_Wit on X, IASIC, IASICK on Blue Sky. It's Always Sunny in Chiefs Kingdom. What's going on, bud?
Speaking of It's Always Sunny in Chiefs Kingdom, if anyone else would like to ever reach out to us, and you don't have or want to have Twitter, X, Blue Sky, any of those or
It's
any of those
understandable.
formats, yeah, totally. We do have an email address, and it is our full podcast name at gmail.com. So it's always sunny in Chiefs Kingdom at gmail.com. The reason I bring that up is several people did use it to request to be participate in our fantasy leagues this year. And so I was able to shuffle off some people that were no longer interested and shuffle in some emailers. And so that was
Mm,
cool.
that's
So
exciting.
we are full up on our fantasy leagues. They are full of people now. There are 40 total spots in the leagues filled by 29 people. So we have a couple people double dipping, but in
Sure.
general, a lot of good a lot of good action there. So thank you to everybody that reached out that asked to be play with us this year and
I mean,
keep
and if you didn't and you want to, I mean, get yourself in the queue. Like I'm not saying spam the
yeah,
email starting now,
sure.
but our fantasy leagues are really fun. They're incredibly successful, and while my personal success has not been at the level I want, especially last year,
Yeah.
uh, where I was heartbroken in both of our leagues that I participate in, kicked in the dick in the finals in both of those leagues. You know, they're just incredibly fun leagues. I mean, we had a tie in the championship. That almost
Jeez.
never happens.
That was
We've
great.
had we have our 16 team cutthroat league, which is the most insane league that anyone's ever participated in
Uh-huh.
which I won and then made
We
it
had a
back to the finals, and then
29-week undefeated uncut
had a
streak, which
had a
was
Chiefs-esque end
yeah,
to my season,
yeah.
which was very sad and aggravating. But man, we have had just incredibly fun, engaging, active listener leagues, and if you guys want to participate, get in line.
Yes, definitely. Love the group that we've put together there. Shout out to anybody that is listening to this that's already in. But yeah, DM me on Twitter, send an email to the Gmail. Also join our Discord if you'd like to. Send again, same way, send me a message, send an email, ask for the Discord link. We will invite you there. We got some good little banter. It's standard Chief stuff. Rate review us, please. We don't do any ads on the show anymore. We've kind of decided that it's not worth our money to run these, the ads that you've heard in the past. So we need your validation.
I'm good. I am so. How are you feeling about all of what I'm doing? Did you like that? Did you think that was good? Tell me I'm good. Tell me it was good. Tell me I'm good. Tell me I'm good. Tell me that was good. Tell me I'm 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 good. Thank you. Is it that hard?
We got a great show for you guys today. We've got news. We're going to do our 53-man roster predictions. Chiefs haven't made any cuts yet, so this will be juicy. I mean, aside from, just the general roster churn, but we're not to the cut downs yet, so we'll go ahead and make some early roster predictions here based on the news that's been coming out of training camp and going into preseason week one, which is how we'll close out the show with a little preseason week one preview, which isn't a real game preview. It's not a real game. It doesn't count, but we'll find something to talk about there. But first, we often talk about training camp news here. It's hot, it's muggy, people are fighting, things are happening. We're going to see these guys out on the field. I mean, pretty much all these guys out on the field on Saturday. So let's talk about something completely different. Jordan Addison suspended 3 games for his misdemeanor DUI. Last July, he was arrested for that DUI. Why is this relevant? Jordan Addison, wide receiver for the Minnesota Vikings. Well, it could be an interesting predictor of what we're going to see happen with Rashee Rice. Now, I think this is relevant in a couple of respects. Number one, I think the timing of this suspension is relevant because, like Rashee, this incident with Jordan Addison happened last summer. Rashee's was a little bit earlier. And so, in fact, that, bodes maybe is more predictive also of Rashee's getting wrapped up here soon.
Mhm.
I do think that the timing of it is significant. This is a lot of times you'll see, obviously, the NFL, while as we discuss, anytime we bring up NFL discipline, it can be quite arbitrary. They certainly would prefer, and everyone would prefer, that they clear the stack of things that they could feasibly close out and enter suspensions on before week one, because teams
Mhm.
like to know that. Every team in the league wants to know if their guy's going to be suspended week one rather than week 6 or week 10 or, week 18. So I think that the timing of this is potentially significant, and I think it potentially predicts a Rashee Rice suspension being handed down before week one. The other aspect of this that I think is interesting is the number of games. So 3 games for a misdemeanor DUI. For those of you who are unfamiliar, he was found behind the wheel on a freeway off ramp in LA, drunk as a skunk and not responsive. So the facts of his case are less aggravated than Rashee's. It was a misdemeanor. But an accident involving injury and intoxication are both aggravating factors. And so they each have their own little aggravation here. Rashee's because he caused a crash. And for all we know, Rashee could have been intoxicated as well, but he left the scene. So we don't know that. Jordan Addison was there in his car, drunk as a skunk. And so, we know for sure that he was intoxicated. Uh, Rashee's case obviously involved a felony. So it is a little bit more aggravated in that sense, but he also received a deferred sentence, which means at the end of, his probation, if he's successful with that, he won't have any criminal conviction on his record at all. I don't think that the NFL, I mean, I know for a fact that the NFL does not give a flying F about what is actually going on in the criminal context, from like a charging standpoint, felony versus
Mhm.
misdemeanor or whatever. But Rasheed's case is slightly more serious. So I'd say based on this barometer, and the only reason why we're even discussing this at all, Taylor, the only reason this might even be a little bit relevant is because it happened right around the same time, and it is a wide receiver, and it involves something that happened with a car. And, like there's a lot of similarities between these two cases, and they happened at the same time. Now, if this had happened 4 years ago, I wouldn't say that it's remotely predictive of Rashee Rice's situation at all, because again,
Right.
the NFL is very capricious and arbitrary when it comes to imposing discipline. But since this happened at the same time, since we're expecting the suspensions to be announced probably fairly close in time, and since the facts of their respective cases are at least superficially similar in a number of ways, I think that this is probably a pretty good predictor. And I would say if I had to enter a prediction today,
Mhm.
I think Rashee gets 4 games. I
That
think
was
he
a
gets. I
great
think he gets one
prediction,
more game.
and also a great prediction on what I was going to ask you, which was how many games do you
How many
think? So
games? I think he gets
that
4.
was double
I think he's
prediction.
going to miss the first month, and I think they'll probably announce it, in a week or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's fair. He did not practice today, but I mean, no indication of an injury or anything. So I think everybody's kind of preparing for something to come down soon. And we're this pod will be up for a week before our next one, so there's a chance by the time you all are listening to this, he's already been suspended, and we sound like idiots because we don't know yet. But yeah, no, you're right on. They are crazy about. It'd be nice to use the legal charging system as some type of rubric for the NFL system, and
Sure.
just give like whatever they get in the law is kind of relative to what they get in the NFL. But I'm sure that would also leave some room for them to get it wrong about stuff. So whatever. At the end of the day, we've been waiting for this now since March of 2024. I'm ready for it to just happen and Rashida serve his suspension. If it's 6+, I'm going to be really pissed at the NFL because I don't think it warrants that. But we'll see. We'll see what happens here. Hopefully before too long.
One final thought before we move on to the next item on our news agenda here, related to what you just said. So I'm glad you brought this up. I think so. Addison came out today and said he wasn't going to appeal it, but of course the NFL does have an appeals process, and occasionally, I mean, it's so hard to judge the possibility of success for an appeal because the whole process is so opaque. But
Mhm.
we have seen people successfully petition the NFL and get their suspensions dropped down somewhat before.
Mhm.
If the NFL comes and hits him with a 6 game suspension, I think you would have an excellent case to say, well, look, my case is not that much more serious than Jordan Addison's, and he got half as many games. So
Mhm.
at least would have the ability to go to the NFL front office and say, now, of course, the problem with these kinds of appeals is that, I mean, the NFL knows that. They
You're
know what
going to
they
the same
suspended. They
people.
know what Jordan Addison was suspended for. So,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
are they going to change their minds? And they're judge, jury, and executioner in this disciplinary process. So, like,
Right.
but the NFL, I think some of that is always public perception too, right? Like the first headlines will come out and they'll say Chiefs wide receiver Rashee Rice suspended for 6 games. And then if he appeals and they knock it down to 4 games, that's not going to generate as much buzz as the headline that says he was suspended for 6 games. It's all about optics for the NFL. We know
I
this.
agree. I agree for
So
sure.
I think there is some wiggle room there. If the worst case scenario happens, I think Rasheed would have a good case just based on the fact that Jordan Addison is set at this number, to go to the NFL and say, come on, why don't you knock a couple of games off that?
You
So
know what would be really nice too is if the appeal allowed him to play weeks 1 and 2, which are very difficult matchups against the
sure.
Chargers and Eagles. And, even if he pushes that suspension a little bit down the road, it would be nice. Would be nice to have him to start the year off in Brazil and against the defending Super
Sure.
Bowl
And then
champs.
he can take some time off when we play the Giants. We do
Giants.
have the
Yeah.
Ravens in week 4, the
Yeah.
Jags, the Lions. I mean,
I know.
there's
There's
no
no,
breaks in the schedule.
no,
There's
you're a
never any
first place
breaks when
team.
you're you know, when you're the champs, ish, the AFC champs, the AFC
AFC
champions.
champs.
Print those AFC championship rings.
Rivalry,
The
rivalry.
rivalry. Let's talk about some of these other teams in the AFC because sometimes, and this is, I think, if we were to go back and look at each of our shows before preseason week 1 for the entire time we've been doing the podcast, they'd all look pretty similar. The first couple of weeks of training camp, there's a lot of stuff to get hyped about, and then you kind of settle into a little bit of a training camp
Yeah, well,
lull
yeah, yeah.
lull between the hype of sort of the initial phases of training camp. This guy looks great. This guy doesn't look that good. One-on-ones, whatever, all this fan footage and everything like that. And then you get into game prep mode, and they're going to be, striking camp in St. Joe here before too long, and going to Arizona to play the Cardinals this weekend. And so this is the week on the calendar, I'm guessing every single year, that our news segment becomes a chance for us to lightly roast other AFC teams. And in
Totally.
this case, two of our friends in the AFC West gave us prime material this week. I guess we could throw the Chargers in the mix. I actually
You
have a
can
Charger
always throw the
that I'll
Chargers.
that I'll add to the end of this. But Antonio Pierce showing up to Chiefs training camp, of course, Raiders former head coach. And this is now becoming a trend at Chiefs training camp.
It's a trend. You see Antonio Pierce wearing the red Chiefs gear. He's not just there. He's not just even in neutral clothes. They put the team gear on him like a captive, like he's a hostage, except he's not. He's there voluntarily, and he's talking with, of course, his former coach, Steve Spagnuolo, who he loves and respects. And this is a trend because another former Raiders head coach donned the red and yellow and went to Chiefs training camp to talk to his former coach. And of course, that was John Gruden talking to Andy Reid a couple years ago. Just very funny and very Raiders for, I mean, look, if if we were if this team that they were from was like the Jags and it was like just some random other team and those their former head coaches happen to have ties here and stuff, that's fine. But like this is Chiefs Raiders. And these two head coaches, and I'm sure everyone that's ever left the Raiders organization, have no love or care for the Raiders. And they're not sitting there thinking like, oh, I wonder if Raiders Nation's going to be mad at me for wearing their number one hated rivals gear, who's running the NFL right now while the Raiders are sitting there languishing in fourth place. And they just decided, hey, I want to go see what winning's like. I want to go see what champions are made of. And so I'm going to go to St. Joe and go pray at the altar of Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, Clark Hunt, and everyone involved with the Chiefs. It's very funny. And I do think that the way that the Raiders, like, this reminded me of Devontae Adams, who's a Ram right now, and was asked
Yeah.
about Stafford's health is a little iffy, and the backup quarterback in LA is Jimmy Garoppolo. And last time we saw Devontae Adams and Jimmy Garoppolo, Devontae Adams was saying all kinds of stuff on the sideline about how he's never been a part of anything like this and blah, blah, blah. He was roasting him. And they asked Devontae Adams, like, hey, what do you feel about Jimmy Garoppolo? We kind of saw, and he was like, I love Jimmy. It was nothing personal. I think we were all miserable with the Raiders. And like, that's just perfect description of what goes on in the Raiders organization. Nobody wants to be there. Everybody that leaves wants to go somewhere else. Antonio Pierce, welcome to the kingdom.
Welcome to the kingdom. Now, let's turn to the Broncos here. Let's do them next. They signed Zach Allen last week, who's a very good player, and I don't want to make fun of that signing, but I do want to make fun of some of the cash that the Broncos are throwing around. It's getting into, again, the dead zone, the lull in the preseason, because I saw the NFL Daily Crew, former Around the NFL show, say that the Broncos might be one of the best teams of football this year. And let's pump the brakes. Okay. The Broncos are getting a lot of buzz right now because they have a second-year quarterback. People love that, even though it's Bo Nix and his ceiling is QB3 in his own division. Like, he'll never be better than the third best quarterback in his division unless Justin Herbert or Patrick Mahomes retire. And
even then,
yeah, who could say, right? But they signed Courtland Sutton to a 4-year, $92 million deal. Now, why is this funny? You're probably thinking, like, Courtland Sutton's one of those players where, like, you hear it and you're like, all right, yeah, that guy's kind of good. Like, maybe I could see it. Okay, let me just tell you what Courtland Sutton has done in his career. Okay, like, he was drafted in 2018. He's 23, so he's older for a rookie. He had a 700-yard season as a rookie, which is great. 1,000-yard season and his only Pro Bowl appearance in 2019 as a second-year player. 1,112 yards, 6 touchdowns. Okay, so last year with the aforementioned Bo Nix was only his second 1,000-yard receiving season in his entire NFL career. Now, he's played 7 seasons, and he's going to be 35 in 2 months. Or 30. Yeah, that's what I meant. Sorry.
Yeah.
I said 35.
Yeah.
I was thinking the number of days in my head. On October 10th, he turns 30. So in about 65 days, he is going to turn 30. And, sure, wide receivers are playing at an elite level for longer than ever. And guys are getting their last big contracts right around this time. Tyreek, got paid when he was in his late 20s. Devontae Adams, like you said, got paid in his late 20s. These guys are getting contracts in their late 20s, but that's Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Okay. It's
that's
not
the top of the top.
Sutton.
Yeah.
He just had his second best season at 29. I mean, the guy, he's a dinosaur. Like, what are they doing? And he's not that good. And the funniest part of this whole situation, just to pile on the Broncos and on Courtland Sutton, both of whom deserve to be piled on and laughed at, is that Courtland Sutton strongly implied, he didn't say it in these exact words, but he basically was like, I left money on the table so the Broncos could, pay these other great players, because we're building this great team. He played in his first playoff game last year as a 7-year pro, right? Like, that was the first time he had made the playoffs. He just beat the Chiefs for the first time 2 years ago, after 5 seasons in the NFL. Let's maybe calibrate our enthusiasm here. Let's maybe take a reality pill.
I agree for sure, of course, but it is really funny to think that, like, the Broncos, okay, last time the Broncos had a hole in their pocket and couldn't stop spending money, they did the whole Russell Wilson disaster. And, like, they just don't seem to know or be able to identify elite talent. And I mean, every now and then they'll run into one, like a Pat Surtain or something, but the throwing the money at Courtland Sutton just reeks of, like, they had nothing else to do with it. They were
Sure,
just
they
like,
had
well,
money and they were like, yeah,
you know,
all right.
all right, I guess we'll give it to this wide receiver that is fine, and we're probably overpaying him, but like at the end of the day, if we didn't overpay him, we're gonna have to overpay someone. We can't. I
Right.
mean, we
Right.
can't just burn this money. So yeah, it's they're funny, and the hype around them is definitely like classic sports cliche. Like we have to pick someone to hype up. Like it's just kind of like, oh, who's kind of a secondary player in a elite team's division that has been down for a while but has like a pretty good history, like blah blah, like all this like stuff that where they're like, oh yeah, the Broncos, that's a perfect pick. And plus, everyone has to be tired of picking the Chargers all the time. And I know they're still
Sure. Right.
picking the
Yeah, that's fair.
Chargers all the time right now, but like, the Broncos hype is just very I can't wait to see it crash and burn. I'm pretty sure it will. I don't think the Broncos are going to be very good, at least to the point where people are, able to predict them. I mean, I don't even know if they're going to make the playoffs this year
I mean,
in a
dude,
7-team AFC
they
playoff
were
field.
third in the division last year, and that
Right,
was their best year in a decade.
right,
Like
right.
they finally cleared the double-digit win mark, in week 18 against the Chiefs backups, right?
Yep.
And blew everybody's sits off with their, shellacking of our C team. And okay, yeah, congratulations, good for you. They finished behind the Chargers last year.
Right.
And like the thing about the Broncos is, and Jordan Rodriguez was the one that was saying that the Broncos might be one of the best teams in the NFL. I think Jordan Rodriguez is smart and good at what she does. She's a
Yeah.
Rams beat reporter. But like the first thing she said was like, "Oh, it's going to be a top 3 defense. It's going to be one of the best defenses in the NFL." Maybe, but like you
Maybe
can't
not.
just count on a defense being good every year. Like
Mhm.
even if you have Pat Surtain and some of the same personnel, like 2 years ago, the same Broncos team that had a lot of the same players, including Pat Surtain, had a 60 burger dropped on them in Miami,
Jeez.
right? Like uh, pretty much the same team. Vance
I think it
Joseph
was
was
a
the defensive
70
coordinator.
burger, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
you're right. It
I
was.
think it was. Yeah.
And like obviously they weren't that bad. Even by the end of the year, that defense was playing a lot better. But like I'm not confidently going to predict that it's a top 3 defense in the NFL.
No.
Maybe, but
Yeah.
like maybe
Yeah.
not. It could be like average at best. And if it's average at best, that Broncos offense is not that scary. Let's move on to the Chargers because we could
Yes.
spend all day talking about
And we
the
have before.
Broncos, and we probably will again. This Chargers one just came to me in a flash of inspiration. It's not as funny because he has since been released from jail. Denzel Perryman got pulled over in California over the weekend, and I'm sure we have a lot of Second Amendment enthusiasts that religiously listen to this podcast because they agree with us politically and obviously think that it was ridiculous that he was arrested for having guns. Am I right? Am I right? And he actually has been released without charges. After this is the funny part, he spent 4 days in jail. He was released on
Jeez.
Monday. He spent the whole weekend in jail. He was being held without bond for these guns. And the funniest part about this, because this is so Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh went to visit Denzel Perryman in jail over the weekend. And, he showed up on Monday when he was released later that day. And he's like, oh, I went and visited him. He's in great spirits. It's like, bro, the guy's been in jail for like 2 days, right? Like he's just being held on bail. Like,
Yeah. When
and
Harbaugh
he ended
showed
up,
up, they were still like orientating him on where
yeah, they were
everything
probably
is in
like,
the
here's the
jail. Like,
bathroom. Here's
yeah.
where you'll put your personal belongings,
Yeah.
whatever. The whole situation is just the tenor of the conversation was just like, this guy had been in prison or whatever. He's in solitary confinement, bro. He was in the clink for like 2-3 days.
I could see Harbaugh reaching through the cell bars and slapping his chest and getting them all
Yeah.
fired up to
Oh,
be in jail and
100%.
stuff. I
He
mean,
probably prayed, prayed with them. The guard said no touching, and
yep, yep.
they were definitely trying to hug it out through the bars. I mean, it just the vibes. And again, this team finished ahead of the Broncos last year. So just saying,
Crazy. Just
this whole
pretty.
division, the news is that our division is still a joke. We still run this town. Let's talk about the 53-man roster. I'm going to let you play us in on this one.
Yeah, sure. So obviously it's preseason, which means that there's really no other than if the person is on the 90-man roster or not. I know camp battles and I know camp hype and stuff like that, and that did play a factor in a couple predictions I made here. But I just have my gut feeling of 53-man roster. This is just kind of based on vibes and based on the investment that the Chiefs have put in these players, and just some rumblings. But in general, this has room to change. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through position by position. We're going to talk about if we need to refer back to how many times the Chiefs have held this number of people on opening day. For example, defensive line is either always 9 or 10 total guys. Every year, 2018 through 2024, it's either been 9 or 10. So you can get a good sense on stuff like that of kind of
Right.
where,
Sure.
what the
Trends.
Chiefs are going to do, or at least what they've done very recently. So with that being said, we're just going to go through, and I'm going to talk about the position, the guys that I have making it, and then we'll kind of talk about if there's any other noteworthy guys that could sneak in, or that I
Dark
was
horses.
a little, dark horses, or people that I was kind of anxious to leave off the roster or something like that. And we'll just kind of go through and see how the roster's shaping out so far. So we're going to start on the defense. We're going to start on the defensive line. And so defensive ends, I've got 5 guys I feel pretty good about, which is starters Mike Dana and George Karlaftis, and then rotation players Charles Omenihu, Felix Anudike-Uzomah, and Ashton Gillotte. And so those are guys that are going to be coming off the edge. And when you combine them with the 4 defensive tackles that I have, which is Chris Jones and Mike Pennell, and then Omar Norman Lott, and I've got Jerry Tillery. They gave him $1.7 million fully guaranteed. And I feel like he's a pretty good candidate. He'd be kind of the last fringe guy on this defensive line. So that's my 9 defensive linemen: Dana, Karlaftis, Omenihu, Anudike-Uzomah, Gillotte, Jones, Pennell, Norman Lott, and Tillery. The only notable guy on that D line that I was kind of wondering about, Malik Herring's gotten pretty good run with the Chiefs over the last couple years. If they did decide to keep him, that would be like kind of special teams, knows the room, knows the coaches, all that stuff. I wouldn't be shocked, or I mean, he's got a $1.6 million salary too. So, but he's 28, and so they're probably trying to get a little bit younger, I would think. So that's kind of the defensive line room. Some people have had Fabian Lovett, the defensive tackle, making it out into the 53-man roster. I'm not sure if that would go up to 10 or who you would cut or whatever, but that's kind of my breakdown on the D line. Any complaints or thoughts, or
No, I think I mean the combination of salary investment and talent and draft capital, like that paints a very clear picture with the 9 guys that you mentioned. And a guy like Fabian Lovett, or Malik Herring, Marlon Tuipolatu, some of the other names that are kind of in this room. And Tuipolatu has a $1.2 million contract, so he has a little bit of money attached to him. Like, these are guys that we're gonna see get some extended run probably on Saturday and in preseason week 2, and will be playing potentially for that roster spot. I think the 9 guys you mentioned are locks. I think the only question is whether they might break camp with a 10th defensive lineman. They've done that in 2018, 2019, 2020, 22, and 23. So in 21 and 24, they broke camp with 9. And I think, the addition of somebody like the linebackers, your bigger linebackers, too, that can kind of, like Chenal, that can kind of potentially fit in on the defensive line lineup, and kind of some of those alignments, maybe gives you a little bit more flexibility there. But I like that group. I think the 9 you mentioned, and we'll see if somebody plays their way into a 10th roster spot on the defensive line.
Yeah. So speaking of linebackers, I've got 6 breaking camp, and their range has been 4, 5, or 6 every year. They've gone 5, 6, 5, 6, 4, 5, 5. So 6 is high, but they've done that twice already. Tranquill, Bolton, Chenal, obviously your 3 stalwarts along the line, the guys that are going to be doing all the heavy lifting. And then my linebacker depth right now looks like Jack Cochran and Cole Christensen, which are kind of your special teamy sort of depth rotational guys, and then rookie Jeffrey Bassa, who they're seeming to like a lot so far, and seems like he's a pretty good. If I were to cut one of these guys, it would have been either Cochran or Christensen. I think
you want to see what the rook can do.
Bassa's in there for sure. And he was a 5th round pick. That was what they got free from the Eagles for trading back one spot. So certainly not going to cut loose on him. But the 6 linebackers there, some of that was kind of a function of towards the end, I was looking for 52nd and third guys, and Cole Christensen was one of those guys that I decided on there. So not super set there, but I think six makes some sense. And then I mean, there's really not anybody other than maybe Cam Jones along the linebacker group that I didn't mention. That if anything, it would be a cut. It would not be an addition to this room. They're certainly not going to do seven, and I don't really see another linebacker making it in over Cochran or Christensen. So that's my six there.
It makes sense. And I think, if your prediction on the defensive line of 9 comes true, then carrying an extra linebacker
Right.
makes some sense. You have a little
Right.
bit more flexibility to use the bigger guys like Bolton and Chanel, kind of to beef up the defensive front a little bit more. And they have done that before in 2021 when they took 9 defensive linemen, they had 6 linebackers. Last year they broke with 9 and 5. So
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
not out of the question that, they could rank with only 14 guys on the defensive front there. But I think that's a fair prediction. I think, again, the combination of talent and investment there points pretty clearly to at least 5 of those guys. And, the Jack Cochran would be the guy, or excuse me, not Jack Cochran, but Cole Christensen would be the guy there
Yeah.
that would be maybe the odd man out if it's 5, I think. But I,
Agreed.
I think otherwise you're spot on.
Agreed. So then we go to the DB room. And the DB room, there's some, especially in the Spags era, there's a lot of
Yeah,
guys that can
sure.
do a lot, that can, I mean, you could either consider these just a DB count instead of corner versus safety. I have it broken down in corners and safeties. And so the ranges on both of those are 4 to 6 in corners and 4 or 5 in safeties. So you're looking at usually a 9 or 10 man total.
It's been 10 every year except for 2019, and then they took
Yes.
9. So
Yes. So they definitely have some pretty easy patterns to watch there. So my corners that I've got right now, kind of an interesting room, but you've got McDuffie and Fulton, your two outside guys, and Watson and Williams. So those four are obviously going to play a heavy role in this team. And then I've got depth here at corner for Nazeeh Johnson, Shamari Connor, and Noel Williams. Seen a lot out of Nazeeh and Shamari there that I feel pretty comfortable putting them in this room. And then Noel Williams, again, draft pick seems like a quick hook if they don't put him on the 53-man roster. I haven't really heard positive or negative about him too much so far in camp. And then to combine that with the 3 safeties, even though Shamari Connor can play obviously a lot of safety, you've got Cook and Hicks. Brian Cook and Jaden Hicks are 2 starters. And then Mike Edwards, they brought in, paying $1 million to come back to the Chiefs. I've got him breaking camp, and that leaves out Chris Roland Wallace right now, which I didn't feel great about, and I probably would like to, if I was refinagling this roster and coming together, I probably would try and figure out a way to work Roland Wallace in. He would be one of my first ins if I did figure out someone to cut. Something like Cole Christensen for Chris Roland Wallace makes total sense to me. But right now, I have him as like the 54th man. And then, Deon Bush has had some moments with the Chiefs. He had a playoff interception in the AFC Championship game a couple of years ago off Lamar. 32 though, and a 32-year-old safety. I just don't know if he's got the athletic juice to stick it another year. So that's kind of the guys on the outside. Thoughts on the DB room?
yeah, I think the only real question at this point is like, is Christian Fulton going to be ready for week 1?
Yeah, he's on the pup. I don't know.
And the Chiefs have been very sort of vague about his status. He has not practiced. Andy was asked a couple of days ago if he would be available for week 1 against the Chargers, and he said, we're hoping. We're just kind of taking it day by day. So obviously he's starting to run is what Andy said. So we'll see where it goes.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see. If he's on the pup to start the year, he has to miss the first 4 games, and then obviously that would open up a roster spot for,
Probably
a
Roland
guy.
Wallace, I would
Right?
think.
Exactly. I would say probably a guy like Roland Wallace, and I think if we're looking at what we hope the roster is going to be at the end of the year, pending everyone's health, he's definitely the guy that they want to be, cornerback 2. It's just a question of whether he's going to be healthy or not. But otherwise, I think you've kind of identified the 10 guys that are in the mix there, and then the couple that are on the bubble. And, with all these position groups, there's probably going to be, between these, there's going to be 2 or 3 kind of surprising cuts, and then correspondingly two or three guys that kind of come up from the bottom of the roster and get
Right.
themselves into the mix. But that's it for the defense.
That's
Let's hit the offensive side.
that's 25 guys. And so we're looking at another 25 on offense, and the pattern recognition on offense has usually been for the OL, we're going to start with the offensive line, either 9 or 10. 10
Yep.
twice 10, the rest year's 9. So that's a pretty solid. You either have a full backup, like a full room of backups to your starters, or you're one man short. And so for my projections for the offensive line, um, they're I right now, I think this is a pretty interesting group in general. We've got the two starting tackles so far, unless Jalen Moore does something, would be Juwan Taylor and Josh Simmons. I do have the two backup tackles being Jalen Moore and Wanya Morris, and then guards, two starters, of course, Trey Smith and Kingsley Suamataia, and then both Mike Caliendo and CJ Hansen. CJ Hansen's maybe your last man out. If they were going to do 9 instead of 10, he would be the guy that I think that gets dropped off here. Because I don't think they're ready to get rid of Hunter Norzad. It would be Creed and Hunter Norzad are your
Right.
centers. So that's your full two tackles, two backup tackles, two guards, two backup guards, a center, a backup center. That would be your 10. Again, everyone I think other than Hansen and Norzad are, to me, complete locks. I mean, Caliendo and Morris are easily part of the backup crew. And so maybe if they haven't seen much out of Hunter Norzad, I don't know, you want someone in there that can play center. CJ Hansen can play a little center. So maybe maybe that's what they do there. But that's my 10. I think they will break with 10. I don't think I see much. And then I mean, I left off Ethan Driscoll. I know a lot of people like Ethan Driscoll. He's a big kid. But I just I don't see him making it over. And now if Simmons was unhealthy or if there was some more struggles with the tackles and stuff, I could see Driscoll like he has. I believe he broke camp as a backup one other time in his career so far. Could have seen him possibly making this room, but other than him, everyone else there feels pretty good to me.
Yeah. I mean, the only one that I have regrets over is Juwan Taylor. Not because I mean, like he's obviously going to be on the team because
I
of
know.
the cap hit. I mean, almost 10% of the cap that he's making this year. Which fortunately will be the last year that will be the case because he's not going to be on the
Man, what a
team next
bust.
year. Yeah, a real bummer. And thanks a lot, Chris Collinsworth, for that because honestly, he is a huge part of the reason why he has not been what we hoped he would be in Kansas City. But yeah, I mean, again, this is a position group where the combination of talent and or cap investment points very strongly to a certain group of guys. And I don't think there's a lot of room for shakeups here. I mean, the shakeup, the big question was like, is Josh Simmons going to be healthy
Right.
and starting week 1? And obviously, that question was answered very definitively like 3 days into training camp. Like they took all the suspense out of any of the battles at any of these
There's no battle.
positions when Josh Simmons came in and looked healthy and destroyed everyone. So yeah, I think that's a good prediction.
Moving on. So that was the line. We'll go right to the quarterback. And I was
Sure.
really surprised to see that out of the last 7 53-man rosters, 4 times the Chiefs have broken with a QB3,
Yeah,
which
that
I
is
would have
interesting.
thought it would have been closer to, lower than that, one or two. But this year, I don't see the third. I don't see Bailey Zappi doing enough for, I mean, obviously Chris Olodokun, who's done it several times. He's been the QB3 when they've had three for, I think, 3 of those seasons. But I mean, I just see it as a 2-man race there. Obviously, Gardner Minshew is going to be the starter. J.K. Patrick Mahomes. That's a pretty. We've talked about Minshew a couple times as far as like the comfortability of a backup quarterback, and I like a guy that's been a starter recently as the backup. We didn't really have that. Like if you think about the last several backups for the Chiefs, and I mean you're talking Moore and Henny and those guys, and and Wentz last year, all those guys were years removed from being starter capable in the NFL. By the time they, decided that they wanted to go back up for the Chiefs, they've been around the block. And I mean, he was a starter last year. Gardner Minshew was. So like, I think he's solid on the QB2, and I'm pretty comfortable with it.
Yeah, it's been interesting because they they have had a preference for Mahomes to have a veteran backup for his entire career. And Pat's going to be 30
Yeah,
in a month. You
he
know,
is the
like
veteran now. Yeah,
he's yeah, exactly. Like they could probably break with a developmental quarterback as the second guy. It's clearly not a case at this point in Pat's career that they just want a Chad Henne or, a Matt Moore or whoever, Blaine Gabbert in the quarterback room to like help
mentor
him.
him.
Yeah, exactly. It's not about that at this point.
Huh.
I think at this point it is about Andy Reid having a backup quarterback that he feels comfortable with coming in and playing a couple of games, and we've seen that happen, more than a few times. Matt Moore obviously being the most prominent example in the 2019 Super Bowl season,
Mhm.
but we've seen the backups Chad Henne come in the playoffs a couple of times
Yep.
and have to at least lead a drive or two or play the second half against, the Browns and close the game out, on fourth down with his legs. Not with his legs. That was on third down and then with the little flip to Tyreek. But
Mhm.
um, yeah, I think Gardner Minshew is kind of the perfect Andy Reid backup, right? He's started a lot of games in the league, and what he lacks in talent, he clearly makes up for in moxie. And he
Yeah,
he clearly is
swagger.
a smart guy.
Hmm.
He played under Mike Leach, I think, in college, right?
That's
And
correct. Yep.
uh got a lot of reps there. I mean, obviously famously throwing the ball around a lot in that offense. So I think um and like you said, I mean, a guy that has a lot of starting experience and a lot of recent starting experience in the league. So I think that prediction is spot on. I think like there may be a time and a place for them to have QB2 be a developmental guy, but we're clearly not there. And I don't think we're going to get there with Andy Reid as the head coach. I think at
Yeah.
this point it's obvious that the reason the backup is your Matt Moore's, your Chad Henne's, your Gardner Minshew's, your Carson Wentz's even is because Andy Reid wants that and not because Patrick Mahomes needs that.
In 2018, when Gardner Minshew transferred to Washington State to play for Mike Leach, he led the Division One football in completions, attempts, completion percentage, yards, touchdowns, and yards per game. He was
Sure.
fifth in Heisman voting.
Yeah,
Gardner
sure.
Minshew. I mean, he
Gardner
was a
Minshew.
dude. He was a
Do you remember when Gardner
phenom.
Minshew came in against the Chiefs?
Of course I do.
I
Week
mean,
one. That
yeah,
was
week
the
one.
that was the Sammy Watkins game.
Yeah.
And Nick Foles was the starter in that one and broke his collarbone in week one, and Minshew had to come in and
And we
looked
saw a
really
little bit of
good. He
Minshew
was
mania. Yeah, right.
we I mean we he was leading off. I mean leading drives and scoring points, and we obviously had put that game away first. But yeah,
Yeah.
he was fun. So that's quarterbacks. Of course, we probably spent more time on that room than
Oh, way
anyone
more time
else
than we
who's
needed to.
ever
But
done a 53-man roster for the Chiefs. But running backs are really interesting. They've
they are
always been.
interesting. This is
They've
like
always.
the first really interesting position group.
I think so. And the running back room tends to be interesting for the Chiefs because they don't have a guy, because they don't have
Yeah.
a dude,
Right.
So they're always this range has been 3, 4, or 5, but it's gone 5, 5, 4, 4, 5, 3, 3. So recent trend of three running
Is
backs,
that,
even
and I
though
assume you're including
that does include Carson
fullback in that.
Steele. Yes, it
Yeah.
does.
Right.
So this year, I've got four again, and I think that kind of makes sense given the room. Pacheco's your starter, but then Kareem Hunt and Elijah Mitchell are kind of your change of pace, short yardage, and receiving back. And then everyone's excited about Brashard Smith,
Yeah.
and he's a camp darling right now. He's a converted wide receiver, so he's got moves, he's got juice. I think this is the guy I'm probably the most interested in making the team out of anybody. I think because he should make the team. He's a draft pick, and that'd be pretty disappointing if they didn't see enough out of him to even break camp with him as a fourth
Oh,
running back.
they've already seen enough out of him.
I agree. I agree. So this room is really only about Carson Steele. Um, anyone outside of him really wouldn't have deserved a chance here. I don't think the Chiefs, with Kareem Hunt, with them understanding that they have a back that they're comfortable with in short yardage, a bigger built back that does not have fumble problems. Carson Steele was a great story and obviously a good, easy guy to root for, but I just don't see them carrying. If they were to put him on the roster, they still would have, I think, these four running backs and then a fifth running back as Carson Steele as the fullback. But I don't see it happening this year, so I've got four.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think honestly, if you're keeping four and Carson Steele's making the roster, I think the guy getting cut is probably Elijah Mitchell. And I like Elijah Mitchell. We've talked about him on the podcast before. There's been a lot of buzz out of him from camp that I've seen anyway. And obviously we're getting into the preseason now. He'll get some reps. I think based on pedigree, he should make the team over Carson Steele. And like you said, the Chiefs have been moving away. Andy Reid was one of the last guys in the league to kind of shy away from. I mean, we were taking a fullback every year, a dedicated fullback every year. And he obviously, I think they stopped doing that a couple years ago, and that was a big deal.
After Sherm left, and they were
exactly,
like,
and they were kind
what
of
do
like,
we do?
well, I mean, just get a running back that can do it, or get a tight end that can do it, which they also have done a number of times. I think that the only reason I say Elijah Mitchell is because Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt are both guys that have a much longer history with this organization, and I think it's all good vibes with Kareem Hunt, right? Like there was bad blood between Kareem Hunt and the organization for years, probably one-sided.
Yeah,
it was just the organization
probably
had bad blood towards Kareem for legitimate reasons. I'm not saying that they didn't have reasons to feel that way, but I think that the vibes last year when he came back were very high, right up until the Super Bowl. And obviously that was his first opportunity to play in the Super Bowl. It didn't go well for him. I'm sure that there is an undercurrent of, let's win a ring for Kareem Hunt, right? Like, I don't think he would be a really surprise cut to me. Whereas Elijah Mitchell, while he has some talent, doesn't have the connection to this organization, and he also has a significant injury history. So
yes.
he could be a guy that Brett Veach maybe tries to flip towards the end of cutdowns potentially, and then you might see Carson Steele sneaking in there. Brashard Smith is making the team. I would be stunned at this point if Brashard Smith didn't make the team.
Me too.
Just because out of all the guys that could make the team, he has a very unique skill set as a converted wide receiver, and we have seen that guy, that not with specifically like a converted wide receiver skill set, but like the Jerick McKinnon on the roster. Like that's Brashard Smith's ceiling and potential role and his niche on the roster. And none of these other guys gives you a Jerick McKinnon guy on the roster.
I think the vision with Elijah Mitchell was that he is
a
little bit more of a faster receiving back, but I think if they like Brashard Smith, and if they've seen enough out of him to be like, oh, he could actually like have a significant role in this offense, I could totally see them being like, well, Elijah Mitchell, we got a younger, more healthy version of you. We're going to go ahead and say goodbye to you and have Pacheco, Hunt, Smith, and Steele. And so that makes sense. So we'll see how that shakes out. Really one of the more interesting kind of rooms to watch in the whole, preseason. I'll love if Brashard Smith gets any type of big play or touchdown or something like that. That'll be good. Moving on to tight ends, and tight ends is a room that, because they've had a GOAT in there for now a long time, they've done 2, 3, or 4, and it's gone 2, 3, 4, 4, 4, 3, 4. So more tight ends more recently than what they did early on in the Mahomes era. This time I have 3. I know. So Kelsey and Gray, obviously, and then I only have Jared Wiley, and I know that leaves out some guys that have had. Tunyon's had a ton of camp catches. Brittingstool is a cool story. Both of those guys are tight ends that I think I've seen on several 53-man roster projections. Either one making it there. I don't know. I just didn't fit a fourth tight end in kind of when I was kind of moving the numbers around and trying to figure it out. I'm fine if they do want to add one of those other guys as a fourth tight end. The Chiefs, of course, love their tight ends. They love to use multiple tight ends. And they love Travis to be able to kind of teach his craft to everyone else and
spread a seed.
Yeah, and Noah Gray and Jared Wiley are both 25 and 26, and one of them is hoping to take over and become the next Travis Kelce, and those two are making the team, of course. And then outside of them, you could have some bodies knocking around, and I do think that this also kind of hinges on the wide receiver situation with Rasheed, how many wide receiver, we'll get to that, but like what number they want to do at the wide receivers, because obviously your tight ends and wide receivers are your pass catchers. And so if the wide receiver number is a little down breaking camp, then that's where you can easily see them fitting in a fourth tight end. But right now I have three.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I will say Jake Briningstool did not practice on Tuesday with a hamstring injury,
Yep.
which will be problematic. I mean, if you're on the bubble, it could be tough, and you gotta be able to get out there and show what you got going on. And he's an undrafted free agent. He did play at Clemson. He was two-time third team All ACC. I mean, like,
nice player.
A good college career, and an interesting prospect.
Hopefully practice squad guy,
definitely
right?
a practice squad guy. Like, if he doesn't make the roster because of the hamstring injury, he might not even, he might be like an IR stash or something like that, right? Like, that hamstring might get a lot worse over the next 2 weeks when they're trying to decide the roster bubble, and he may take a redshirt year, and we may see him, down the road. But I think Kelsey, Gray, and Wiley are locks, and then after that, it kind of depends on how they want to shuffle the last back in the running back room, whether they want to get a tight end there that can do some of the more fullbacky stuff, how Rasheed's injury shakes out, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think the three tight ends are a lock. I think they will probably take a fourth tight end. I'm not sure who it's going to be, but I think they will probably take a more, Kelsey, Gray, and Wiley. I mean, none of those guys are known for blocking.
They're known for receiving.
I know that they all can block, but I think that there is a good chance that they get a fourth tight end in there that can block. I'm not sure who it's going to be. I think Tunyon's got a great shot at it, just based on his camp. And Briningstool, if he hadn't,
been hurt,
if the hammy hadn't tightened up, I think he would have had a good shot at it too. But yeah, that's an interesting one. Beyond the first three, I think they'll probably take one more tight end, but I'm not sure who it's going to be yet.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. Secretly, I am hoping that Robert Tonyan does not make the team just so he can give up his 85 jersey and Royals can take that.
That makes total sense.
That is the only reason why. Nothing against Big Bob Tonyan. Final group in the offense is the wide receiver room. And of course, I don't think this has as much like intrigue to it as it did the last several years, just because I think we know more about more of these guys than we used to. I mean, the Rice situation is interesting, and obviously by the time they're deciding the final 53-man roster, I'll be shocked if he's not suspended by then, right? I think I
would be shocked if we don't learn something before week 1.
I agree. And so that being said, obviously, Rice would take up a 53-man spot if he were here, but I'm gonna go ahead and, I guess we'll move in. Okay, I'm gonna executive decision and actually put in Remigio for his spot. So originally, I did not have Nico Remigio on the roster if Rashee Rice Remigio, and so Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy, Juju Smith-Schuster, Jalen Royals. I think those four are your four non-Rice wide receivers. And then, of course, everybody's camp darling, probably the star of the show so far this summer, has been Tyquan Thornton. He has been making catches, impressing guys. His speed has been on display. A 25-year-old wide receiver that is a cast-off from New England and is getting great chemistry with Patrick and looks like he could maybe have some juice in the return game or some type of, gadgetry side, kind of like a McCole Hardman. Not quite as maybe I don't know. McCole is a heavy, like a loaded term for Chiefs these days.
Controversial figure.
Yeah, exactly. But, Tyquan Thornton has a lot of fun potential. And so I then would have Remigio being the sixth if you want to kick Rice out. So Brown, Worthy, Smith-Schuster, Royals, Thornton, and Remigio. If, for whatever reason, Rashee Rice is not suspended going into week 1, I still feel like they probably would want a heavier wide receiver room anticipating a suspension. Like they probably would just say, well, all right, well, he's going to be on the 53, but we probably should bring 6 with him because we're probably going to need 6 when for sooner rather than later. And the wide receiver the pattern so far has gone 6-5-6, 5-5, 7-7. So the last 2 years they have kept 7. They've had weird wide receiver issues the last couple years. They haven't known anything about any of them, who they wanted to keep, who was any good. The wide receiver room's been a mess for a while, and I do feel like everybody feels pretty good, pretty confident about this group. This does not include Sky Moore, and of course, you mentioned earlier that the only cuts have been camp casual or normal roster churn cuts, but we have to shout out the Prince who was promised, Justin Ross, for not even being on the roster at this point. We would have been talking about him probably making the team as the wide receiver 6 or something. So, so that's the wide receivers. Remigio is really interesting, especially with Tobe saying that he is the best returner on the team by far.
Yeah. We know Tobe has some sway.
Tobe's got some pull.
Back end of the roster.
He's the associate head coach. You know, he makes a lot of decisions. So that being said, a lot of this will hinge really heavily on what happens with Rasheed.
Yep. Yeah, it will. I think that's correct. And I think they're gonna take 7. And if Rasheed is not on the roster, it's probably going to be 6, and it's going to be Remigio. But I think Remigio is making the team either way. It will be either 6 or 7, depending on whether Rasheed gets suspended or not. You know, it's a good situation to be in. And I will also point out regarding Sky Moore that last week we considered taking some side action on the over under.
Oh shit!
And I said outside of references to his performance in the Super Bowl, we will mention him one more time when he gets cut from the team. I said we were going to mention him one further episode where
you're right,
he gets cut from the team. Now he's guaranteed to get at least 2 mentions, unless
slam that over.
When he gets cut, we just don't mention it next time.
So it's just not even newsworthy.
It's not even newsworthy.
Well, maybe we'll do that as a little bit here. This is our one. And if Sky Moore news, if any Sky Moore gets cut from the team news happens, sure, we'll bring it up. It's not like we're going to refuse to talk about him. But if the only thing that ever happens with Sky Moore from now on is that he does not make the 53-man roster, I will pledge to you that I will not mention his name. This is the last time on the show.
Okay, that sounds good. Specialists, Butker, Winchester, Ariza.
I'd lock him in, baby.
That's the 53-man roster. 53. You hear it for your first.
Yep.
We will, of course, we may or may not check our math depending on how well we do. I mean, obviously, if you did a great job predicting the roster, you're going to come back and tell the listeners about it. And if you don't, who cares?
They'll never hear. Yep, exactly right.
Well, this is going to be perfunctory. It's something that we have to check off the list. Thank you. It's preseason game 1, and the Chiefs are playing in Arizona on Saturday. It's our first game preview of the 2025 season. Of course, it's not a real game. It doesn't count. So we'll approach it a little bit differently, but a little bit the same. Normally, we would start off talking about fun and interesting matchup facts and narratives before getting into the matchups. There's almost nothing interesting about the Arizona Cardinals. I actually, though,
no, that's true.
As a thought exercise, I do want to just ask you, and to sort of work ourselves back into shape. What is the first thing you think of when I say Cardinals Chiefs?
Patrick Peterson. and the almost Chief that or DeAndre Hopkins, who did become a Chief. I think of Cardinals that I wanted, and those are really the two. Tyrann Mathieu was not a Cardinal, was he? No, he wasn't.
He was, but he was Texan right before he came to the Chiefs.
So he went Cardinals, Texans, Chiefs. Yeah, that's right.
Correct.
I almost said Tyrann Mathieu, but then I was like, I actually don't remember if he was a Cardinal. I was thinking of him as a Cardinal, but
played like most of his career there before, the latter half, right?
Man, he was old.
He was drafted to the Cardinals. Yeah.
So he went Cardinals, Texans, Chiefs, Saints. So four teams. All right. Anyway,
he played 5 seasons with the Cardinals.
Other than that, I think of
that just goes to show how irrelevant the Cardinals are.
I think of the field that hurt Trent McDuffie and Harrison Butker, and that the Chiefs later won a Super Bowl on, of course.
Yes.
And that's the best Chiefs Cardinals thought I have is Super Bowl 57.
That was the first place my mind went as well, was the sweep in 2022 week 1 and week however many weeks it
22,
is with the
I think.
17 game 22 week
I think
1 week
so.
22 winning on that field in Arizona. The other thing that I thought of right off the bat, and this was kind of an obscure one, so I wanted to shout it out there for
Great.
those of you who are listening to the podcast and screaming this out. It was Patrick Mahomes setting the Chiefs single season touchdown record with 30 against the Cardinals in
Ah,
about week 11
yeah,
of the
sure.
2018 season, week
Mid
11 to week 12.
2018. Yeah.
Tyreek Hill, I think, scored 2 touchdowns in that
He
game, I
took
want to
over the
say.
camera.
He took over the camera.
Yep.
Yep, exactly right. So that was the other thing that jumped into my mind after the week 1, week 22 turnaround, winning both games in Glendale. Okay, well, anyway, let's talk very briefly about the offense and defense. Normally, we'd be talking about the matchup, the Chiefs offense against the Cardinals defense, but I don't know anyone on the Cardinals defense, and it's preseason, and
How could you?
there won't be any game planning. So let's talk about what we are interested in, or rather, who we are interested in. We're recording this on Wednesday night, and Andy has not spoken yet. So by the time you listen to this, he probably will have spoken to the media, but I'm just going to tell you what he's going to say. He's
Yeah.
going to be asked who's going to play on Saturday,
Yeah,
and he's going to
definitely.
say the starters will play a quarter.
Yeah.
And what will actually happen is the starters will play
one drive
each
Mhm.
on either side of the ball, maybe 2 if something really weird happens.
Or if it's a super short, if it's a 3 and out,
Sure.
they'll play a second drive. But
Yeah,
if they
maybe
even
they'll
get
play a second series.
20 plus yards, that's it. That's it.
Some of the guys might get a little bit more run, like Josh Simmons might stay in there a little bit longer
Yep.
just to get him, some game reps, make sure they feel comfortable. Although they may not want him out there on that turf
That's
too
right.
much longer since he's
Protect him.
But in any case, we know how this is going to go. So I'll just have you pick. Just give me one player you're excited to watch.
Brashard Smith. I'm really interested in Brashard Smith. I think I want to see him pop, and I want to see the excitement about a running back that can actually hit a home run is so fun.
I know.
It's such a fun toy to have as an offense. And boy, between Pacheco and Kareem, they just don't have that. So I'm hoping Brashard Smith is that.
And not only is it fun to hit a home rim with your running back, but it's really fun when you hit a home run with your running back through the air.
Yeah, with your quarterback.
Yeah, like they just did in camp the other day.
Yes.
Him catching a deep ball like 50 yards down the field.
Yep.
That's fun. Anthony Sherman catching a wheel route 30 yards down the field is fun. And that was Anthony Sherman, right? Like that was Anthony Sherman. We haven't seen that since the first game of his first year as the starter, I'm with you on that. I really want to see that. I'll pick the obvious choice here. I just want to see Josh Simmons out there for an appropriate amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
Like I want to see him out there for one drive, and I want it to be a dominant drive from the Chiefs where Patrick Mahomes doesn't get touched. Josh Simmons is rubbing everybody's face into that miserable dirt on that awful field. And then I want him and the rest of the starting offense to hit the showers. So
can we both also co-nominate Patrick Mahomes? Because
it's always
anytime he's on the field,
it's always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to see Patrick Mahomes. And I'll throw one more out there. I know I said one each. I'm excited to see Jalen Royals out there just because.
Hell yeah.
It's always fun to get the shiny new wide receiver toy, and he has been. He's been generating some buzz in training camp for sure. So I think it'll be really fun to see him get out there. Let's do this really quick before we wrap the show. Let's do this same exercise, but for the defensive side, give me one defensive player that you are interested in watching on Saturday.
I'm very much always interested in rookies in week 1 preseason, just to see them in a Chiefs uniform, see them mixing it up. Gelati and Norman Lott and Bassa, those guys are all on my list, certainly. Even Noel Williams. I'll go with Ashton Gelati because a defensive end is really fun if he's good. I mean, that's Gelati kind of represents a higher ceiling to me as a player than Norman Lott, purely based on the position. I'm sorry, I know Chris Jones is the best defensive player on the team, and he's in the same position as Omar Norman Lott, but I want to see Ashton Gelati rip around the edge and rip someone's head off.
That was actually going to be my pick, and I was, but
easy pick. I mean, that's
I love it because the first thing that jumps to mind when somebody says Ashton Gelati's name is that he fought Josh Simmons.
Yes,
and I this is the best part about preseason week 1 is that, especially since we don't do the joint practice thing, which by
Uh-huh.
the way is completely legitimate, and a team should look at what we do in
And
training
do
camp
it.
and they should just copy what
Yep.
we do.
I
They should
agree.
just do the same things that we do.
I agree.
Don't do joint practices.
Pick a
Then
hot Midwestern city.
yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Have your training camp outside in St. Joseph where the humidity is 1,000%. And when the day gets hotter, send your guys back out there for longer.
Yep.
Let them fight, but like let them fight amongst the team, right? Like,
Yep.
don't be sending them out to some joint practice where they're going to go fight somebody on a different team.
No.
They might hurt each other, right?
Yes,
Like your own
correct.
guys,
The other
your own
team is definitely not going to treat your guys with the care that your own guys are.
No, and in fact, we hear almost every year, people are complaining in these joint practices that somebody's taking cheap shots or whatever,
Yeah.
and you just don't have to worry about that if you're keeping everything in house and you don't have
Yep.
to show anything to anybody else.
Mm.
You don't have to give anything away. And I mean, training camp's hard enough as it is when you're the Kansas City Chiefs. So I want to see Gelati out there for attitudinal reasons. I just want to see
Mhm.
him out there uh splitting skulls and unleashing his fury on the field. If I had to pick another guy, since you did say that, I know this is never gonna happen. I'm just gonna speak into existence. I'm just gonna say Christian Fulton. I know he's not gonna play.
Ooh,
I I
sure.
just want to see him. I would be very happy if he was out there. I know it's not gonna happen because
Yeah.
he's not practicing and he just started running.
Certainly
Like,
not happening yet, but it'd
he
be
is
great.
important to this
Mhm.
defense, and I know it's not going to happen on Saturday, but it would be really cool if he stepped into some sort of healing spring and came out and was suddenly able to play on Saturday. I'll throw one more out there actually though. You convinced me on Jeffrey Bassa, in
Yeah.
the
Right.
linebacker room. Like
Right. Yeah.
the Chiefs have had such an interesting history with the linebackers. They've drafted a lot of linebackers and with mixed results.
Mhm.
Willie Gay's not on the team anymore. They had that run there where they were drafting, a linebacker top 100 every year. They were
Yeah.
getting pretty good guys. I mean, Chenal, Bolton just got a second contract. Chenal, I hope will probably get a second
I would
contract with
think
the
so.
team.
Yeah.
And Bassa, not quite as high draft capital, but a guy that they're excited about. And I think it's always fun to see, like a rookie linebacker. It's almost always going to look terrible, but it's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun.
We're
So
excited about the rookies.
we will be back next week to talk about the preseason game 1 that was, and we'll see you next time. It's always sunny at Chiefs Kingdom.